Video number 2 of the biochem slide, so we're going to start from here. I left off, so we'd gone through in general what biomolecules are. We talked about amino acids and proteins, and again, proteins are polymers of amino acids. You should be able to recognize an amino acid and what proteins do. They're involved in a lot of the reactions. They cause reactions to happen. They have some structural roles as well. All right, and they have these long chains that fold back on themselves. Carbohydrates, we talked about this a little bit. The word carbohydrate, like carbon, water, right? They're monosaccharides, one, polysaccharides, many. The main role of carbohydrates is they're the first source of energy that your body burns. So when you're burning fuel to do all the stuff that you do, the first thing you burn is carbohydrate. The second thing you burn is fat. Once you're out of fat, you start breaking down protein. If you're burning protein for energy, you're starving. Anyway, carbohydrates have the general function CH2O, N, meaning a certain number of them. Monosaccharides are simple sugars, right? Disaccharides would be a polymer of two. Oligo is a polymer of many or some, and poly is many. Okay. So these are some examples of some monosaccharides. One more try. Whoops, let's keep going. There we go. Okay, this is glucose. So monosaccharides are called polyhydroxyl aldehydes and ketones. So you see there's a bunch of alcohols here, alcohol functional groups, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 alcohol functional groups, and this is an aldehyde. Okay, that's called an aldose, aldehyde sugar. Ose means sugar. This is a ketone. Remember ketones? R, carbonyl R, and there's also alcohol functional groups. The naming of them, glucose, fructose, you don't have to worry about. All right, but this is glucose. Glucose is also called dextrose. This is the sugar that your body runs on. Fructose, you may have heard of this is the sugar that's in fruit. You may have heard of high fructose corn syrup. It's got a lot of this in it, okay, but that's more manufactured. All right, they can be all sorts. They can be 5 carbon chains, 6 carbon chains. They also form these cyclic structures where this molecule turns into this, and I don't want to go into the chemistry of how that takes place. It's not important for this class, but it's the same structure. It just kind of loops around this carbon. This is carbon 1, and then see how carbon 5 attacks to carbon 1. All right. And it's also a hydrolysis reaction. So this reacts, a water molecule comes out, very similar to what happens in proteins to form a disaccharide. I just told you what it is, hydrolysis. Right, here's a couple of interesting disaccharides. So this is sucrose, table sugar, which is a disaccharide of fructose and glucose. Lactose, milk sugar, the disaccharide of 2 glucoses. I'm sorry, glucose and galactose. The difference between glucose and galactose is this is galactose because this OH is up. There's a condition called lactase inactivity or lactose intolerance. And this is people who can't drink milk, basically, have trouble breaking this down. And if you can't break it down yourself, the bacteria that live in your gut can, and they produce gas. So if you're lactose intolerant, you get kind of gassy and painful from eating things that have a lot of milk sugar in them. Just so by the way. All right. This is starch. So this is a little bit short-term energy storage. Most cells have some starch in them. And you can see it's just a polymer of glucose. So when we break down energy, we start with this molecule, glucose. In the fight, flight, fright, when someone scares you and all of a sudden your heart's beating really fast, you have a lot of energy, it basically starts breaking down starch. So you got all of these ready to go. So after you run out of sugar, then we burn starch, but it's still carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is actually broken down in your mouth. So saliva contains an enzyme called amylase, which breaks down starch. And if you hold something starchy in your mouth for a while, which you typically don't, you chew and you swallow. But if you hold something starchy in your mouth for a moment or two, it might start tasting sweet. So if you eat like a potato chip, after a short time, it'll start tasting sweet because you break it down into sugar. Just to show you, we're not going through this, but this is the kind of stuff you do in biochem. Breaking down of glucose into energy, and this is only part of it, is a multi-step process. You can see there's literally there's 10 reactions here, and there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 18 reactions, and then there's more that happens. There's one in between here. This is glucose. This is part of how we break it down into energy. And again, if you're really interested, that's what a biochemistry class will do. But realize it's not a one-step process. It's a very, very long process. All right, so what I need you to know for sugars, for carbohydrates, is what carbohydrates are, be able to recognize what a carbohydrate, that this is a carbohydrate, and you should know their roles. So their major roles are for energy, short-term energy storage, but energy, also they do have some structural roles, but carbohydrates, mostly, that's your fuel. All right, let's talk about fat now. So lipids. Lipids do not form polymers. Okay? They're defined as, they're very nonpolar, they're soluble in organic solvents. So organic solvents are nonpolar solvents. Okay, their roles, nutritional, like I said before, when you run out of sugar, you start burning fat. All right, so it's a second choice. So there's even a process, some people, they're like the runner's high, or there's a term called hitting the wall. Hikers call it bonking, where you run out of sugar. And then there's some people transition better than others. But what happens is your body chemistry, it's like turns on a switch where you start burning fat. And for a moment, you're kind of out of gas. And then you get that second wind. That second wind is very biochemical. When you start burning fat, you get energy again. Some people do it better than others. All right, anyway, so it's nutritional, structural, it's a major part of cell membranes. Waxes are made of lipids, and there's a lot of hormones that are lipidy. All right, so there's three major types of lipids. There's what are called the fatty acids, which are glycerol-based lipids. There are steroids, you may have heard that term, and eicosanoids, leukotrienes. All right, and I'll go through each one of them separately. So this is a molecule called glycerol, and glycerol, you can see it's an alcohol. Okay, 1, 2, 3 alcohol forms. It forms esters to fatty acids. So let's look at what a fatty acid is. A fatty acid is this. So carboxylic acid, right? So you learned carboxylic acids. What makes it fatty is the R group. The R group is typically a very long chain, so over 10 carbons. It might be 15, 20 even. So they can be very, very long. Now it says this is in red. Obviously the colors aren't there. All right, but this is glycerol. These are 3 different fatty acids. When your body stores fat, it does what kind of a reaction? Take this and combine it with this. By the way, this is an ester. Remember esters? Okay, does this. So if you remove a water molecule, so we've seen condensation reactions 3 times now, right? This to this, take out a water molecule, you get this. Right? This is how fats are stored. When your body starts breaking down fat, this reaction goes the other way, hydrolysis. So I've talked about how we use water, right? Okay. And so these are broken down into energy. Okay, they're also insulating and that kind of thing. All right, cholesterol. This is cholesterol. So cholesterol is not good or bad. It's just drawn that way. I'm just kidding. This is cholesterol. This fused ring system. See these 4 rings here. This ring system is called steroid. Right? This is what cholesterol is. Remember, each of these is a carbon, and there's enough hydrogens, so that's a C with 3 hydrogens. Okay? And it's an alcohol. So here's the role of cholesterol. So it keeps lipids in cell membranes from aggregating, so it maintains the fluidity of cell membranes. They have to be gooey enough and yet not too gooey. It's a precursor to bile acids. So bile acids bile is made by your liver. It's stored in your small intestine, and when fat gets into your small intestine, remember fat is nonpolar, so it's not water soluble. So it has to be broken down like detergents break things down, has to be emulsified so it can be absorbed. Bile acids or bile salts help break it down so that they can be broken down or at least mobilized so they can be stored. Right? If you don't have a gallbladder, you can't store it, and so you have a little bit more trouble eating fatty foods. Okay, it's a precursor to the steroid hormones, which are the sex hormones. Also a precursor to vitamin D. Right? These are some steroid hormones. You may have heard of these. This is English, so they spell estrogen funny, but this is cholesterol. This is estrogen, progesterone, right? Maintains pregnancy, that kind of thing. Female hormones, testosterone, which is a really bad drug, but these are all based on steroids. That's why they're called steroids. All right, these are bile salts, so these help dissolve dietary fat. So you can still see where they have that same steroid structure. These are amphipathic molecules, meaning that they're both polar and nonpolar. So this is very nonpolar. This is polar. See how it's charged? See how it's charged? Charged here, right? That's why these help break down fat in the aqueous environment in your small intestine. Right? This is vitamin D. You can see it's related to that. Vitamin D. Your body makes vitamin D. You just need cholesterol and sunlight. Calcium as well, part of it. So if you're never out in the sun, you could get vitamin D deficiency. Right? Now let me explain what hormones are before we go any further. Hormones are messengers. So they're signaling molecules, and they're spit out by one cell or one part of the body, and then they send a signal to something else. So it could be a signal that says, hey, cells, divide and grow. It could be a global signal that says, express secondary sex characteristics. It could be the signal that says, you know, the oh shit response if someone scares you, that made the fight, flight, fright. Those are all hormones that regulate that. And even in inflammation, so with the COVID virus, one of the drugs that they're looking at will slow down the immune response a little bit so that it doesn't go overdrawn. And when we talked about the immune system, I talked about signaling molecules being spat out by the T helper cell or the CD4 cell that tell other cells what to do or turn switches on. That's what hormones are. Many hormones are made from cholesterol. Some of them are made from what are called eicosanoids. And these are just some examples, prostaglandins. These are all short distance acting hormones, so they're not global. This is just an example. So this is a fatty acid. Okay, this is a steroid. This is glycerol and a couple of fatty acids that's been derivatized. It's got a phosphate group, and there's several reactions here. This one, interestingly, you may have heard of. This is the molecule that says AL. So the pain response is hormonal. So something, you know, you hit your finger with a hammer and it hurts. There's a signal that's secreted. What drugs that are painkillers do, a lot of them, they inhibit this pathway so that that molecule can't be made. And some of them are called COX inhibitors. You may have heard that term. Cyclooxygenase, COX, COX inhibitors like ibuprofen does that. There was a drug on the market for a while called Vioxx. Okay. Pain is important, though. Think about, why is pain important? Okay, there is actually a disease where people can't feel pain. And if you can't feel pain, those signals that say don't do that, right? Pain is your body's way of saying don't do that. I heard someone once say pain is just weakness leaving the body. I hate that. Pain is your body's way of saying don't do that. All right, but these are all derived from fatty acids. All right, I'm going to stop here, do one more video just because I like to keep them short.